You're going to be okay. That's what I want to talk to you about today in the podcast. Because a couple of days ago, I got a message from a lovely lady who's fairly recently been listening to the podcast, had been feeling overwhelmed with all the information out there on the internet about how to manage her thyroid condition. And here's what she said. She said, then when I found your podcast, it brought a sense of, I'm going to be okay. And I thought, that is a great topic for the podcast. And obviously, she's picked that up from listening to other episodes. But I thought, no, I'm going to do an episode all about encouraging you that you'll be okay. This is episode 124 of the Let's Talk Thyroid podcast. We've been going now for a bit over 4 years. And the mission hasn't changed. My mission hasn't changed. It's always been about providing positive and practical help for people with thyroid conditions. And I think a lot of that is about sharing hope, speaking life, offering you some hope, that you will be okay, and sharing some practical tools and tips to so that you can actually be okay, and it's not just a way to think about things, although it is that. There's also some really practical things you can do. Now, a number of years ago, probably going back over 10 years ago, I'd say, I read a book called He'll Be Okay. By a lady called Celia Lashley, and it's a book about raising boys. If you don't know, if you're a new listener, I have 3 boys. They're now just turned 21. We had a 21st birthday party on the weekend, 18 and 16. So, and they're okay. Like they're good kids, good young men. But when they were little, in that sort of under 5s, under 10s, it was full on. And if anyone's got kids, it's full on. I found 3 little boys quite full on. And I think just knowing that, here was a book that was written by this lady who was actually a prison warden in New Zealand. Not only did I read her book, she actually came to my boys' school and did a presentation, and everyone was just hanging off every word. She passed away a few years ago, but I'm sure the book's still available. And look, really, without going into all of it, essentially she was a prison warden, and she'd seen a lot of what she described as good young men make, split-second poor choices and end themselves up in prison. And so she wanted to talk to parents around kind of what you can do so that your good kid doesn't end up like that. And essentially, the bottom line of what I remember of it anyway is you've got to let boys take age-appropriate risk. And as mums, you've got to back off. So anyway, this isn't a podcast about raising boys, but just having a couple of things that I remembered and that encouragement that he'll be okay really did give me a lot of encouragement and, throughout those hard years. And so I was reminded of that book as this lady shared, that sense that just from listening to the podcast that she'll be okay. And I thought that's what I want to encourage you with today on our podcast is you'll be okay. So if you want to, if you don't want to listen and you just want to get the core of what I'm going to be saying, it's kind of summed up in the book that I wrote. Now came out 2 years ago. It's called Let's Talk Thyroid. Positive and practical thyroid help looks like this. If you're watching on YouTube, this is what it will look like if you purchase it from Amazon. If you purchase it directly from me, you'll get the original cover, which was Kiss and Make Up with Your Thyroid. I'd love you to buy it directly from me if you're in Australia, but if you're not, definitely it's available as an ebook and as a paperback on Amazon. And it really sums up everything that I just have learnt in almost 30 years of trying to manage my thyroid health. So I want you to know that you'll be okay because I'm okay. And if I'm okay, you can be okay. If I can do this thing, if I can find what living a thyroid-friendly lifestyle is for me, if I can find some tools and some practical things I can do alongside, what I do with my doctor to feel okay, then I'm confident that you can too. Being okay is not about being perfect. This isn't about I'm not promising you that you'll have health perfection or you will completely resolve your Hashimoto's or your hypothyroidism or your Graves' disease. You may, and I'm not saying you won't, but what I am encouraging you with is that you can feel better. You can be okay. But okay, so okay isn't perfection. And I think I've got caught up over a number of years searching for health perfection. And I've realized that that's not the process. That's really not even attainable. It's That's not what this is about. So I guess I just wanted to be clear. When I'm saying you'll be okay, and here's how I know you're going to be okay, I'm not saying you're going to resolve everything all at once, quickly, easily, simply. I wish it was like that, but it's just not. But that's okay. That's okay. Look, as I said, I've been on this journey for decades. If you've been a long time listener of the podcast, you'll know bits and pieces of my story. And I can definitely say that over those years, there've been periods where I've felt more okay than others. I too am on this journey. I too take ups and downs and twists and turns. And sometimes I'm feeling more on top of it. Other times I'm not. I think that actually is part of the journey and part of accepting that there will be ebbs and flows. There will be times when you're feeling great, your symptoms are under control, you're managing your thyroid hormones well, the lifestyle stuff you've kind of nailed. And then other times it just feels like the wheels have fallen off, you've let everything go, and, you kind of bumbling down the road rather than kind of flying down in a chariot. There are times, I think it's good to know that there are times when it can all feel too hard. And it tends to be when perhaps it's when you do go digging, go looking for an answer and you find lots of different conflicting information, perhaps a bit like the lady that sent me the message. There is so much access to information now, it can feel a bit overwhelming. Sometimes it feels all too hard when you've just been diagnosed and you're not sure where to start. And, you start listening and you start reading and you think, oh my gosh, there is just so much to learn, so many things to do. This thyroid thing affects every cell in your body, every system. How am I possibly ever going to get my head around this? It can also come when perhaps it's been all right for a while. And then, like I said before, the wheels start to fall off. So it actually doesn't matter to an extent, where you are on this journey. But if you're feeling a bit not okay, a bit overwhelmed, a bit confused right now, then I want to encourage you that it can be okay. You will be okay. Sometimes for me, when it happens, I'm going to give you an example. It might be easier. The last 12 months have been pretty difficult in our household. So 12 months ago yesterday, I'm recording this on the 13th of August. So 12 months ago yesterday, my husband's business burnt down. Now, if you've listened for a while, I've shared a little bit about that, but he owns an electronics manufacturing business here in Brisbane. And, we got a call in the middle of the night from his business partner, factory's on fire, and it's been devastating. However, there's been a lot of incredibly miraculous things that have happened out of it. They've got their business up and running again in a completely different facility. Really, there's been incredible miraculous provision. I believe God has been incredibly kind and generous. Lots of good things have come out of the hard. However, it's been really hard, more so for him than for me, but I've been trying to support him through it as well. Look, definitely 1 year on, it's easier than it was a year ago or even 6 months ago. But there's been a lot, like when something like that happens and perhaps you're listening and you've had a tragedy come out of nowhere. Nothing you were prepared for, nothing, like there's all sorts of tragic things. And I know so many of you go through and perhaps are going through some real trauma. And so realistically, when things like this happen, some things do go out the window. Some wheels do fall off, and that is a season of survival and coping. But so the fire happened back in August. Towards the end of last year, in amongst that, I said to Lee, would it help if I went back to work? Perhaps having some regular income coming in that is not from just from him. And, let's just face it, selling books on Amazon is not a way to get rich quick. I can promise you that. So, every few dollars helps, but having some regular income that was outside of his business, he said, yeah, that would be helpful and that would take some of the pressure off him. So, a long time ago, I used to work as a mediator for separated families. I have gone back to that work 3 days a week. I started in December. I've been willing to do that. I can't say I was super keen at the beginning. So there was a lot of me just trying to work out, well, how am I going to do this? How am I going to keep the podcast going? How am I going to keep supporting my thyroid community? How am I going to keep the family going? Like working 3 days a week in an office compared to the flexibility that I've had for probably, the last 10 or so years of working for myself and doing my own thing, did take, it took a lot of working through. And like I can say now, it's been over 6 months. I'm in the routine of it. I'm in the routine of work. It's had a lot of extra benefits. It's probably been really good for me to get back out into an office environment and working with other people and not just being at home by myself all the time. I'm able to help people in different ways. And so I'm using skills that I hadn't, used for a while. So I've brushed up on those skills. So there's been a lot of benefits to me too, but it has thrown out my routine. It's every day for me is different now. I start work at different times on those days. I'm really still not, I'm getting better, but I'm not quite in a great exercise routine. I think in the last, like this year as well, we've had a lot of big celebrations in our household. We've had birthdays have been 16, 18, 55, 50. That's me. And 21. So I had lots of parties. We were away for 3 weeks earlier in the year. My eating has been less reined in. That for me, I guess some of it is probably stress, some of it is just life. But I'm always gluten-free, that, but the dairy kind of creeps in and the sugar creeps in and having the drink on the weekends creeps in. And all those little things over time build up to me then not really feeling that great. And I think in amongst this last 12 months and trying to work out what to do, with the podcast, which I have worked out now. I'm just putting it out when I've got an episode. I do want to keep this going, and I've found now I'm in a routine that I'm able to do this. But I think just in that flux, there's been less accountability. I think I find you've probably noticed if you follow me online, I haven't been posting as much. I guess when you feel like things are not going great, you don't tend to want to put them all out on social media. And it's not about trying to hide things or pretend things aren't good, but I'm not one of these people that is just going to vomit everything all over social media. Not in the moment. I can look back and reflect, and I certainly have noticed about myself that I don't tend to share as much on my public platforms when things aren't going so great. I probably don't feel as creative. I don't feel as good. So if you notice me go quiet on social media, it usually will be that perhaps things aren't as great. And then I'm not feeling as confident to share all the things that are working and doing and all of that. I say all of this to say I get to, sometimes I don't feel okay. Or not as okay as I usually do. And some of that is just life, ebbing and flowing. But you get to the point, I guess I want to encourage you that if you're at that point where you think, oh, this is all a bit hard, I'm not feeling great. Sometimes you've got to ride that out a little bit until you get to the point where you're actually have the energy to turn it around and do something about it. And I was recognizing that probably the last 6 or 8 weeks. I'm thinking, all right, Annabelle, birthday's over. Um, you've been at work now for 7 or 8 months. You're in a bit more of a routine. It's time to kind of rein it back in around the edges and get back to the things that you can control, because you're going to feel better. Like I had been like, just even within my body, I'd felt more bloated. I knew the way that those things that were creeping into my diet were having an impact on the way I was feeling. I was feeling more bloated. My clothes were tighter. I just wasn't feeling as good, not as much energy. So it's that spiral down. I'm like, right, okay. I'm going to have to start to do something about this. And then I did a thyroid strategy session with a client, and she's like, I want to do the Kickstart program. And I'm like, great, I'm going to do it with you. There's actually 3 of us just doing it. It's not something I'd planned. I think in the back of my head, I thought, I wonder if I should do a Kickstart soon, but I didn't even really have the energy to promote it a lot. But when this other lady's like, right, I'm ready, I thought, good, I'm going to do it too. Just that accountability. And so we're 1 week in. I've reined in my food. I even had a 21st birthday over the weekend and didn't let everything go. So I thought, right, okay, bit of accountability. What can I control? Let's get this thing back on track. And I think when it does get too complicated, and if you're feeling like what you're going through now is a bit too complicated, that is a time to remember to kiss. That's my thing, right? If you listen for a while, kiss. I've even got my kiss earrings on if you're watching on YouTube. Keep it super simple. And I have to say that to myself too. Keep it super simple. If things feel too complicated, pare it back. Keep it super simple. And remember, my overarching principle for my thyroid-friendly lifestyle, and I guess most of what I promote here on this program and with all that I do, it's about reducing inflammation. So if you can just think, what can I do to reduce inflammation? Then that's the core of keeping it super simple. So get back to what you can control. And here are some of the things that you can control. Well, I believe you can control them. They're things I can control. And that it is food. Like, let's face it, food is not the be all and end all, but it is a pretty core place to start, because I think you do usually do get pretty good bang for your buck. So you can control your food. That is reducing your typically inflammatory foods. And so for me, I've worked out my body likes a lowish carb paleo style diet. That's where my body thrives. That's where I feel the best. And so it's not my bottom line. My bottom line is gluten-free, but that's where everything else gets fudgy around the edges sometimes. And then I rein it back in. And for me, that is, like I said, low carb paleo. So no gluten, grains, dairy, or sugars, not too many carbs. That's when I feel best. And I can control that. And yeah, it is hard sometimes. And that's why it does fluff around the edges. But I can control it. And with a bit of accountability and being in the right headspace, like I hadn't been in the right headspace. But now pretty much all the parties are over. I was feeling kind of bad enough to take action, and think sometimes you've got to actually get to the point where you feel bad enough that you're actually ready to make some changes. And so I know for me that is something that changes the way I feel fairly quickly. It's 1 week in. I'm 1 week in. I'm already feeling less bloated. I'm feeling more positive, more motivated, because I'm controlling what I can control. So food is something you can control. How much is on your calendar is something you can control. And we know that stress is a major driver of inflammation. And, I think I've talked about this I'm sure I've done an episode on boundaries. Certainly we've talked a lot about the thyroid personality, which tends to want to do, and take on lots of responsibility and do lots of things. But you can control to a very large degree, not completely, I get that, but you can control what goes on your calendar, how much you commit to, what you say yes to. And if you're in a period where things are feeling overwhelming, where perhaps your health isn't feeling great, then perhaps it's time to really relook at what goes on your calendar. And in particular, what can you take out? What can you take out of your day-to-day? What sometimes maybe even saying no to social events. But what can you do to reduce that pressure so that you've got a little bit more time to rest, recover, be unhurried? I came across the word unhurried a few years ago, and I just love the concept of living unhurried. So what can you do to be unhurried? How much movement you do is something you can control. You can just get out and go for a walk around the block. If that's all the movement you do, that's, it's better than not moving. Like I've spoken about before, setting relatively low step targets. If you're a step counter and you wear a watch like mine and you want to count your steps, don't set your target at 10,000 steps a day and then get disheartened after 3 days when you've stopped doing it. Set your target low. Now, mine's quite low at the moment, much lower than it was. It was 6,500 steps, where I usually I was getting 7 or 8. I actually pared it right back to 4,000 steps, which is really a pretty low target. I can generally get to that without actually going for a walk, whereas the 6,500 I can't. And for a period of time, I've needed just to reduce that target. But I've kept a target because it actually still keeps me motivated. And it's probably time that I upped that. I'll probably up it by 500 or 1,000. I'm not going to put it straight back up to 6,500. Just those little, even though like the little thing when my watch ticks over and I've hit my 4,000 steps, still does something positive within me to keep me going. So movement is something that you can control. The other things I talk about in my book about things you can control is a large amount of the toxins that you're exposed to. So that's things like switching out, reducing or removing the chemicals in your food that you eat and drink. So being mindful of those toxins, but switching out, your food storage, plastic for glass, putting a filter on your water so you're not drinking all the chemicals in your water, and preferably removing the fluoride. It's switching out your personal care products. And so some of those things might seem like little things, but if that's actually helping to reduce the toxic load over a period of time, because you think, how many toxins am I exposed to daily in what I put on and in and around my body? You can reduce those things, and they're actions you can take. And when you take action, those little steps might feel like a little step, but over time they build up, and that actually builds confidence and accountability and starts to make you feel better. So there's probably more of those things that you can control. They were the first things that came to my mind as I was thinking about what I wanted to say to you. And so then once you've put a couple of those things in, and I'm not saying you have to do all of them all at once. Maybe you just pick one. Start with one thing. But when you start to take action, the feelings will follow. And then when you start to feel a bit better, you can get back to the harder stuff because you've got a bit more energy then. You can get back to connecting the dots or digging a bit deeper into understanding the complexities of living with an autoimmune thyroid condition. You can, perhaps read a bit more broadly and start to kind of, really kind of work out, all right, well, I've dealt with some of this low-hanging fruit of the diet and lifestyle. Now I can actually think, well, do I need to fix my medication? Do I need to find a new doctor? How do I deal with the adrenal fatigue? Or perhaps I'm going through perimenopause, and so do I need some more hormonal support? You can deal with some of those more complex things when, after you've dealt with the low-hanging fruit and you're feeling a little bit better. And I guess that is what I really like about the thyroid-friendly lifestyle, is it deals with the low-hanging fruit. And I don't mean that in a derogatory way or in a, the low-hanging fruit is just the stuff it's not easy, but it is the easier things to deal with. and you get pretty good bang for your buck. Now, you might not get complete bang for your buck. Each one of those things that we've just talked about are not the total thyroid healing solution, but they're a core part of it, and that enables you then to deal with the other things. And often, actually, I think just in dealing with that low-hanging fruit, that's enough to reduce the overwhelm, and then you actually start to feel better. So it becomes this kind of then a positive upward spiral rather than a negative downward spiral. And that is the core of what's in my book and core of what I talk about in the podcast, and all of what I do is dealing with this low-hanging fruit, because I do really feel like it can be empowering. Something I've had on my vision board for at least the last couple of years. Some of these things spin around. In fact, if you're on YouTube, I'm going to show you. Oh, I've got a few different vision boards. I'm not going to, but you can kind of see here: speak, life, offer hope, and then empower, educate, and encourage. So they're the things that I've had on my vision board for a long time. But I really do believe, like, there's a proverb in the Bible that says, it's from Proverbs 18:21, and it says, life and death are in the power of the tongue. And I do believe that what we say can have that power of life or death. It has the power, what we say in our heads, to spiral you up or spiral you down. And so we can control that. So I want to encourage you to speak life over yourself, to offer hope for yourself. And if you don't feel like you've got it, then, as I've often said on this show before, borrow some of mine, because I've got plenty of hope and faith for you to offer you, because I've seen it in myself, and not just in myself, I've seen it in countless people that I've worked with, or people that have shared their stories, or the guests that I've had on this show that have hope to offer, because they have worked through these things too. So I really do believe that offering hope is, well, I believe it's helpful, and I believe you believe it's helpful. And what I want to do is I just want to speak a blessing over you, and then I'm going to give you a few tools, I suppose, that I've got, that if you need a bit of help, and then I want to leave you with one more thing. This is not a long episode. It's really just an encouragement episode. There's nothing new in this episode if you've been listening up to this point, but you will be okay. And so, yeah, for those that have been listening for a while, you probably know that I'm a Christian, so I'm going to speak you a blessing in the name of Jesus. So in the name of Jesus, I bless you with the feeling, the sense that you're going to be okay. I bless you with simplicity of action, with the ability to pare back and see the next one thing that you need to do. To bless you with that ability to keep it super simple. I bless you with speaking life over yourself and not death. I bless you with significant improvements in your health as a result of taking action, of every little thing that you do to reduce inflammation and to, reduce stress in your life. I bless you with seeing the results of that being fruitful. And I bless you with healing. And so I want to speak that blessing over you, and I want you to feel, if you're listening, and I just want you to feel blessed. I want you to feel like that I have offered you some hope and some life and some blessing. So, if you do need help, then I am here to help you. And even though, like I said, I'm back at work 3 days a week and doing not being as visible, I'm always happy to help. Hopefully, obviously the podcast is a great place to start. Skip back through, maybe re-listen to some episodes, or, there is an episode on boundaries if you feel like that's a good one that you need, or on personality. There's a few similar episodes to this one, so you might want to go back and listen to those again. If you haven't already read my book, I would encourage you to read my book. I'd be grateful if you did. And if you have, leave an Amazon review. That would be amazing. You might want to consider the Kickstart program. And even though we've got like a tiny little group going now, just 3 of us, it's set up that you can do it at any time, and I will always support you through it. So if you want to start it next week, that's fine. You can start it next week. It's set up in a way that when you purchase it. It's 97 Australian dollars. You get Getting Started ebook, you get the journal, to track how you're feeling each day. You get the recipe ideas and book. And you get a daily email from me with some words of affirmation and a recipe or a recipe idea and some encouragement, so you know exactly what to expect throughout that 30 days of kickstarting your thyroid-friendly diet. So it really is the food focus. So that perhaps that's something as a place to start. I do have a whole lot of other resources like Write My Thyroid Story, and I've got the whole Kiss and Make Up with Your Thyroid program, and I offer thyroid strategy sessions and a whole lot of different things. So if you do feel like you do want a bit of extra support, then please go to letstalkthyroid.com and check out what I've got. There's plenty of free resources as well as paid resources, so you don't have to spend lots of money, but I do encourage you to invest in your health. So what I'd like to leave you with all these podcast episodes is I want you to just think about what's the one thing that you're going to do as a result of what you've listened to today. Not everything. And if you come up with 5 things, you probably do none of them. So I want you to think, what's the one thing, which is really what's your next step? What's the one next thing that you can do to feel okay in your thyroid journey? And I want you to write it down. You can email and tell me what it is if you'd like, or send me a message on social media. I will definitely love to encourage you with that. But just the one thing that you're going to do. And I want to encourage you that you will be okay. If I can be okay and others can be okay, given that 1 in 8 women have a thyroid condition around the world, and there's a lot of people who have already taken action and are okay. And so borrow from their experience, borrow from their encouragement, borrow from me if you need to, but just know you'll be okay. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Let's Talk Thyroid. If you have enjoyed the content, or perhaps you're thinking, oh, my mum needs to hear this, or my sister or my bestie, I would love it if you would share this episode with them. That really just helps spread the positive and practical message of Let's Talk Thyroid and helps that broader thyroid community, our friends and family, to live well with their thyroid health. So you can just, share the episode. If you subscribe on whatever platform you're listening to this podcast, it's free. It's really helpful because then you'll be notified every time a new podcast comes out, and it just makes it much easier to find. There's usually a little subscribe button or a bell, or follow often is the terminology. So if you wouldn't mind doing that, that would be helpful. Of course, if you want to leave a review, even better, just a sentence or two about how the podcast has helped you. You can definitely connect with me via letstalkthyroid.com. That's where you'll find access to my book, my coaching, my freebies, and really everything that I offer in terms of thyroid support.